Okay, what if I told you only need 2 pieces of kit to film rollers like this? Okay, rollers. So that was true. 2 pieces of kit and you can film rollers. Those clips that you just saw, that was the first one that I did. And it is relatively easy. You basically need 2 vehicles, 2 people, 3 would be better, and you can capture some amazing content. So the pieces of kit you need, I filmed that on the DJI Pocket 3. We'll talk more about the settings a little later. And then I used one of the Delkin suction mounts. I used the dual cup, dual knuckle one, so you can kind of change all the angle. It's about $100 on Amazon. Everything I'm talking about, I'll link in the description. And then there is a 3rd piece of kit you can use. It's optional. If you're shooting automotive photography, or if you've captured cars before, you probably know this, you need a polarizing filter. It just reduces all the glare. It's like wearing a pair of polarized sunnies. Newer, one of the more economical camera accessory brands, they've got a really good kit of ND and polarized filters, so I'll link those. So those are really the 3 pieces that you need. The last one is going to be optional. Okay, so then you're going to need 2 vehicles, your chase vehicle and then your subject matter vehicle. I used my buddy's minivan. You want to think about that surface at the back of the vehicle. So the car that you're shooting is going to be following the car with the camera, and a minivan is perfect because there's no wind resistance, there's no drag. You can mount it right to the rear. So here's the Delkin mount right here. So you got your dual suction, your dual knuckle, and then your 1/4 inch threaded tripod adapter. So that's the only other thing you're going to need with the DJI Pocket 3 is you need your extended battery or just your battery grip, because it has the female thread for your tripod adapter on the bottom. You know, I obviously didn't use my car in this type of capacity when we used it, but I'm just going to show you how easy these are to use. So you press them on. There's 2 little buttons here. You press, and then your lever locks out. Okay, so we press in, that gets all the air out, lever locks, and then you have all your adjustments here for which kind of angle you want. I don't know what the speed rating is, but these things are crazy. They're almost like too hard to get off after. So I wouldn't really worry about losing it. But if you are worried about using it, I attached a safety tether. So I tied a piece of twine, you can use a piece of rope, a piece of webbing, to the mount itself and then back to the DJI. And then I tucked that rope into the trunk of my buddy's van. It's a $1,000 camera, so I don't want it to go tumbling down the road. And there is a silly old school of thought, if you don't know knots, tie lots. So just tie a bunch and try to protect your investment and keep that safe. When I filmed that first set of rollers, I mounted the camera directly to the center of the back of my buddy's van. And then you can just play around with your different settings. So you can be in a left lane, he can be in a right lane, and then vice versa, and then you can go straight on. The one thing I will say about the straight on shots is you got to get really close. This lens, you know, it is a pretty wide lens, so you got to get really close. Honestly, the best angle is if you have your camera vehicle, the rear bumper in line with the vehicle that you're shooting 1 lane over, and that gives you the best shot. So I'm mounted to my car here. So the next thing you want to think about is how you're going to track. So you're going to be operating a vehicle, someone else is going to be operating a vehicle, and this thing has to be able to track. So I'm using face tracking right now. That's obviously not going to work on a vehicle. So if you go into your menu settings and you select your subject tracking, that's the one where you're going to get the 9 different grids, and you can position your subject matter in one of those grids. Now that starts off fine. As soon as you get a car in between you or any kind of distance, you're gonna lose that subject and then it's not gonna be able to find it again. So the best way to do it is to use the DJI app. And that way you can draw a box around your subject matter and then you can track it perfectly. If you don't wanna use the app, or if you don't have enough people, this is gonna be your second best option. It's gonna track the best that it can, but I'll show you how to use the app now. DJI Mimo app is what you wanna use. You wanna connect the device. Okay, so now we've got our device connected. So you do have full control just like you do. So this is really nice in case you lose your subject or you don't know what's going on. You can kind of reconnect everything here. So you see that Ford Focus, that maroon one. Now my subject is tracked around that green. So what I found, if your vehicle's behind you, I actually drew the box around the kind of the front grille, the front third of the vehicle, and that helped kind of keep it in a better framing position. So that's it. And then as you move or the vehicle moves, your subject is going to stay tracked. So that's definitely the easiest way to try to keep your subject properly framed and tracked. Now, if you have a third person, that's a lot easier. So your third person is going to be manning the app in the camera vehicle. Obviously, if you're just driving a vehicle yourself and trying to manage the app, that's kind of a distracted driving thing. I'll leave that there, but if you have a third person, it makes it that much easier. Then you can change your framing and change any of your camera settings. Let's talk about camera settings.
Okay, camera settings. So I'm going 4K 24 frames per second. I usually go 30 frames per second, but in this situation, you want more of a cinematic look, and that calls for 24 frames per second. Okay, so we've already been over the subject tracking, so we swipe over from the left. I go manual exposure. Now, standard videography rules, you want your shutter speed to be double your frames per second, so you can't do 48, so you do 50. Okay, so 1/50th shutter speed, and I set my ISO as a range. You do want a little bit of, I guess, adaptability for cloud cover and sun cover. So that's going to range from 50 to 1600, so that's fine. You can't set an exposure compensation there, but I keep it normal. Glamour effects, none. So color profile, this is that D-Log. So you just have to remember that that's a D-Log M. So it's not going to be your standard D-Log. If you look at my full review of this camera, if you try to put a standard Rec 709 LUT on there, it's going to be crazy intense and oversaturated. So on DJI's website, there is a good Rec 709 that is meant for the D-Log M LUT. So that's how I shoot that. White balance, you can play with yourself. Just, I wouldn't recommend putting it on auto. You'd want to figure out what kind of color you want there. And that is pretty much it. Same thing for vertical. Obviously, we're only going to drop to 3K, but we're 3K. And then same thing, you just want to play around with your subject matter and your framing. Log on to the DJI app and start capturing it. And that's one of those newer ND32 polarizing filters. They're magnetic. They're magnetic, they just clip on. You get about 8 different ones in the creator kit. I went with the 32. The day I was shooting on was kind of like today, a little bit sunny, a little bit cloudy. The 16 wasn't enough, and the 64 was too much.
And honestly, that was pretty much it. The troubleshooting that we had was, if you get traffic in between you, that subject tracking, it's gonna lose it. But I would stay even at a far distance, we kept that tracking, that green box stayed enabled. So you just press record and you just go. So I drove for about 5 minutes and then we changed lanes, started another file, drove for another 5 minutes, changed lanes. You wanna make sure you're facing in different directions. Obviously, if you're shooting against the light or towards the light, or with obviously a side light would be the best. You can get a ton of different shots. And I was blown away by the quality that you can get. Not to toot my own horn, but my first roller, probably premium conditions and everything lined up, and it made for a beautiful, beautiful shot. So I know this little camera is creating a little bit of a buzz amongst the car community. If you've shot rollers or you want to shoot rollers, let me know what you think, if there's anything that you would do differently. Obviously, there's different cameras and different subject tracking methods. The only other thing I've seen done, and I think this might be overkill, is guys are, you know, those tow hooks, those eye bolts that a lot of modern cars come with. So you've got a little trap door in your bumper. They're actually screwing in the eye bolt, which goes to the frame of the vehicle. We use those on the job for like dragging vehicles out of a ditch for rescues. So they're screwing that eye bolt in, which bolts to the frame, and then Newer has a clamp mount. So it's a clamp mount that would go to the eye bolt, and then it's gonna have your tripod adapter there. In that case, that camera is going to be bolted to the frame of the vehicle, so that isn't going anywhere. So maybe if you're doing any, like, obviously legal racing or any high-speed highway stuff, that's the mount you're going to want to use. I don't know the miles per hour, kilometers per hour speed rating of those Delkin suction mounts, but I just had to take it off the side of my vehicle and it almost ripped the door off. So they're really, really strong. So get the camera, get the filter, get the cars, and start shooting some rollers. Okay, thanks for watching.